so this is the Leningrad Codex. Remember how I said before the Dead Sea Scrolls, we only had a text that was like 1,000 years older than them? So from 1000 AD, this is the Leningrad Codex. I believe this is the cover, and then this is what the text looks like. So this is the oldest. We did before the Dead Sea Scrolls have Old Testament parts, little pieces, some individual books or fragments of books before this time. But this is the oldest, complete, full, entire Old Testament that we had until the Dead Sea Scrolls came around. So this was a big part of our history of translations. Because the Dead Sea Scrolls were discovered in the mid 1900s, which isn't that long ago. So so everything before that, and honestly, this is still very accurate to what the Dead Sea Scrolls have. So the Old Testament, even over that 1,000 years, really wasn't changed. It's been very well preserved over time, which is pretty amazing, and it's cool to see this. The Dead Sea Scrolls were found in the 1950s. And they're manuscripts of the Old Testament from the 200s BC to about 70 AD. There's some different theories that the Essenes planted them, or that they planted it in those caves outside the Dead Sea in order to preserve what was going to be destroyed when the Romans attacked. They anticipated the Romans were going to come and destroy Jerusalem, and they planted them there. So there's different theories running about how they got into those Dead Sea caves. And there's not just one. There's a whole variety of caves that they found these scrolls in. But they're ultimately our oldest copies of the Old Testament. And there actually are some outside the Dead Sea that go to this time period, but not many, and they're small. Between the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have almost the entire Old Testament. I want to say they just left out like Esther maybe, or something like that. Not like little something left out, but they had almost an entire Old Testament built out of these Dead Sea Scrolls. So you end up having a 2,000-year-old Old Testament with these Dead Sea Scrolls, which is pretty amazing. And if you ever go to the Bible Museum in Washington, D.C., you'll see a lot of these. Totally worth a visit if you haven't been. This is a silver scroll, probably the oldest relic. 700 BC, you've got a piece of numbers there. So it's like it's a trinket with the numbers on it.
And they wore that around the neck.
Yeah, most likely. But what they have is this. So they have this insert, and this actually here is this is a redesign of it, modern redesign of it. So what they originally found was a piece of silver that lasted the time, and it had a tear in it here, but you could see it was that piece of numbers. And this is more of like a remake of what they thought it originally looked like, or at least how they probably wore it. But this is actually more like what the actual item would look like nowadays. The actual artifact would look. It's just like it's a beat up piece of silver that has a hole in the middle. You have the Merneptah stele. A stele is like an ancient billboard in a way. And it records history. So this is from 1205 BC, so 1,200 years before Christ. Very, very old. It mentions Israel. It's actually, I believe, it's Egyptian King Merneptah's military victory over Israel. So it tells us that Israel was an established military power by the 1200s BC, just like the Bible tells us. And the wording refers to Israel as a people, not a land. So it's the Israelites. It's the people of Israel being a military power. It also tells us that they didn't have a king. So that matches that we're in the time of Judges. Which it matches the biblical storyline. So very cool, validating thing that kind of counter it's a parallel point to the Bible, and this is really, there's a lot of this type of stuff. So you got the Tel Dan stele here. It says the House of David on it. I believe that's highlighted there, but yeah, House of David is on that. You got the Moabite stone from 840 BC. It declares Moab's independence from Israel, so the Moabs basically rebelled against Israel at the time. This is a battle relief from Pharaoh Shishak, and it mentions the Highlands of David. This was a relief. This is in a wall in Egypt, and it listed. This is the biblical Shishak, but they pronounce it Shoshenk. Just some military conquests over Israel and Judah. So that's pretty cool. King David's palace. Well, They can't prove it, but that is assumed to be King David's palace. This is the Erech cylinder. Mentions the city of Erech, which is, this is 30 from 3500 BC, mentioning the city of Erech. So very, very old. I don't know what it was made of that the thing held up over that length of time, because that's a 5,500-year-old relic. So I don't know what the heck it's made of, but whatever it was made of something real tough, because they can still see the relief in it, and they see that it mentioned the city of Erech, which we see in Genesis 10:10. So some real validation for the geography of the Bible there. Pretty cool to see that. It's not a religious item, you know. It's a secular item that happens to mention what the Bible mentions, with there being a city of Erech. So very cool that something can even last that long.